So much has happened, it's hard to believe it was just last August. Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, Missouri, was killed by a police officer. His body lay in the street for hours, a loved member of a particular family and a symbol of all the black bodies destroyed by white men through American generations, as his family and his neighbors gathered in shock and anger. Darren Wilson, the man who killed Michael Brown, was not charged in his death. In the aftermath, Ferguson and the St. Louis area have become ground zero for a new wave of civil rights work, a fight for fair treatment of black men and women, perhaps the beginnings of repentance for America's original sin of racism. Discussions of racism among white people can tend toward the theoretical, political theories, or people who might be elected. But for many people of color, there is real and present danger. And where do you turn? Young black man who fears for your own life, black mother of sons for whose life you fear, where do you turn for solace and strength? For many, for generations, the answer has been the church. But even the churches are not safe. Journalist Sabrina Joy Stevens wrote, "Arson against black churches has a long history in America, related to the central role these churches have traditionally played in black communities. Dating back to decades before the Civil War, the black church has been both a place of worship and a site of resistance to violent oppression. From 19th century movements to end slavery to 20th century opposition to Jim Crow segregation to present-day struggles like Black Lives Matter, the black church has been key to the long and ongoing fight for civil rights and equality for all Americans." But recently, as in generations past, predominantly black churches have been targeted for destruction. 6 were burned last summer. A young white man gunned down 9 people in an historic black church in South Carolina, and now, just last week, another string of 6 arsons at historically black churches barely covered by the national media. I've heard many of you, some of you have talked to me, talking about this new resurgence of hate. I've heard you express anger, sadness, fear, disappointment. Some are tired and cynical after working so long, only to see racism persist in a new generation. Yet, again, life calls us to ask, what is the work of Unitarian Universalist congregations today? We say in our 7 UU principles that we will affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Not that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That would be easy enough. But that we will affirm and promote these values. This is one of the promises that our congregations make to each other as part of our 7 principles, which is our covenant among our congregations. So affirm and promote implies action. It implies work in public. Work among ourselves, sure, but work in public too. How do we do that now? How do we do that now? As a whole, Unitarian Universalists are a privileged lot. Many of us are used to being in charge. Statistics tell us we are typically highly educated as a group, and we have, again as a group, higher than average income. We're also largely white, more so by far than the culture at large. It becomes important then that we educate ourselves, that we not rely on people of color to educate us, those of us who are white, but that we educate ourselves and that we become allies to people of color who are doing the work. Important to listen more than we speak, to work but not be in charge, That may be a tall order for us. The challenge of this became evident at our General Assembly this past summer. General Assembly is a gathering of delegates from our over 1,000 congregations. We gather to learn together, we worship together, we play together, and we do the business of our association. There's a process at General Assembly called action of immediate witness. We have a fly who I think must be a Baptist or something. He's really trying. I'm teasing. I have lots of Baptist friends. I'm sorry. There's a process at General Assembly called the action of immediate witness process. Basically, it's a way to bring an issue that is sort of hot in the world to the floor of General Assembly for a vote. You gather up enough signatures for your issue and you can get on the agenda. This year, youth and young adult people of color and allies drafted a proposition calling the Unitarian Universalist Association to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Before an action of immediate witness comes to the floor, there is what is called a mini-assembly, in which as many delegates as would like to gather, get together and ask questions and propose amendments to the original resolution. It's very Robert's Rules. And then those amendments can either be incorporated or unincorporated, and then it comes to the floor and we sort of almost do it all over again. One statement was particularly sticky in the mini-assembly. It was a call to support prison abolition, or the abolition of the prison system. This is a position taken by the Black Lives Matter movement, basically acknowledging that the current prison system is so broken, it is so skewed toward mass incarceration of young black men, that we need to dismantle it and start over. Prison abolition. Well, the resolution came to the floor of General Assembly with that statement intact. But as soon as it was proposed, well, we did what the process invited us to do. We started to wordsmith it. In short order, some disturbing things began to happen. White people assumed they understood, many, what prison abolition meant. Some offered to help correct the language drafted by Unitarian Universalists of color, who knew exactly what they meant when they wrote it in the first place. Someone approached the microphone and, assuming that prison abolition meant doing away with all prisons, said, "We don't want people like Charles Manson just running the streets," as if that was what the authors of the resolution did want. And I have to say, I was very ill. I had been quarantined by my colleagues on the Board of Trustees to a corner of General Assembly, and I was watching this from a distance, so a lot of what has come to me is from other people, but I have to say, I sympathized. I didn't understand the term prison abolition either. I was not educated, and I didn't know what to do. But as a result of that process, feelings were hurt. The people of color who brought the resolution had been asked to lead, and now that they were leading, they were being criticized publicly. White people who wanted to be allies jumped into the place of supervising and correcting. People were angry. There was some shouting on the floor of General Assembly. In the end, the resolution calling us to support the Black Lives Matter movement passed by a wide margin, but at a cost. I'm one of 11 trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and last week we met in Boston. As a board, we spent some time in retreat learning about the Black Lives Matter movement. Then we talked about our own process at General Assembly. The board, after our meeting, issued this statement. The board regrets that the process in place, the limited time, and the racism we're still working to root out inflamed debate and brought out the worst in many of us. People were hurt, lines were drawn in the sand, old wounds were open. We know this work is full of heartbreak. And we must find the will and the way to do a better job. Sometimes learning is very public and very difficult. We'll be talking with folks and figuring out how we can do it better. Still, the result was a resolution brought by our young people of color and allies and approved by the General Assembly, calling our congregations to support the Black Lives Matter movement. This is what allies do. We support movements led by people of color, and we proclaim our support publicly so that even our neighbors know that this is a place in which voices of color matter, in which black lives matter. I was in Selma several months ago and heard Jeremiah Wright. Do you remember Jeremiah Wright, President Obama's former minister, preach? And he said black bodies have mattered in America for a long time when it comes to slavery and to what percentage they count when they vote. But black lives have not mattered in our history. And so we stand publicly and say that here and in our culture we'll be working to make them matter. I know that sometimes the movement makes some of us uncomfortable. Interrupting political rallies from people who we're voting for or would like to vote for. Making big public statements. Using language like white supremacy. I know it makes some of us uncomfortable. And yet, I, as a white person, am not in charge here. I need to listen. I need to follow. I need to use the pulpit that being white in this culture affords me to call attention to the plight of my siblings of color and to show up to support when my support is called for. We UUs may need for once to do what we're told. When was the last time you did what you were told? It's not our strong suit. Without giving up our reason, of course, sure. But follow, not always lead. Amplify voices of color with our resources. Can we be trusting followers? Can we follow even if sometimes we don't quite agree or even quite understand? Here at VUU, we're responding to the Black Lives Matter resolution by educating ourselves and by looking for partners. After I preached a sermon on Black Lives Matter a couple months ago, VUU members Beverly McCormick and Barb Quijada hosted 2 talking circles on the issue. In one of those circles, 2 young women showed up, one of them the vice president of the Black Graduate Students Association at Arizona State University. She said, hey, some of what you're doing and what we're doing might intersect. And she invited me to their meeting. And so this past Friday, I met with the Black Graduate Students Association at Arizona State University, and we just started to imagine what working together might look like. At this point, we're not sure. They're thinking, and I'm thinking, and I'd invite you to think too. Let me know. But we're going to meet again. It's promising. They're doing some great work, and I would love to figure out how we can support what they're doing. And I said we're educating ourselves. Even today, after this service, we'll be showing the movie 12 Years a Slave. And as I said in the announcements afterward, Beverly and Barb will create a safe space for you to reflect on watching that painful film, what it brings up for you. And I know, as surely as there are those who are hesitant for us to become involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, there are people who are anxious for a long-term objective and a short-term action plan, which results in some measurable goal at the end of 2 years. Maybe we eradicate racism in a 1-mile radius or something like that. Friends, relationships are required in this work, and relationships of trust take time. I don't want us to be a flash in the pan for Black Lives Matter and then to burn out. I hope that we become a strong, reliable ally in unraveling oppression in the cities that we serve. An ally that can be counted on not just 5 months from now, but 50 years from now. I see a future in which little Jackson's children will be here at VUU, carrying on the work we began. Let's not allow our desire to see the fruits of our labors cause us to rush it now. We're moving, and we're going public. We're hanging our banner. We're letting it be known that we know Black Lives Matter. We're going to bump into one another. We're going to disagree. We're going to have neighbors who disagree with us. And all that is okay. All of that is part of the human experience. It's part of living in a community. You may wonder, what will we do if somebody vandalizes our sign? That's a good question. It has happened to other congregations who have hung banners like this one. Right now, I'm inclined to just let it hang vandalized to get some pictures to the Republic or a blogger who has a bigger reach than the Republic. Because a banner hanging vandalized is a powerful witness to the community in itself. Maybe if it gets vandalized, somebody here will say, I'd like to buy a new banner, and it needs to be a bigger one this time. Who knows? But today, we bless this banner. A banner that many of you have signed over the past weeks and that you can still sign today. Will you join me in a spirit of prayer? Great Spirit of love and justice, we are joining our voice with voices around our nation in proclaiming publicly our support of the Black Lives Matter movement. We can see that this banner may well signify for some hurting person that this is a safe place to bring their full selves. It may anger some. Surely even some here this morning are not so sure about it. But we're all children of the same love. And when all is said and done, I pray that this small act of public witness will be a reminder both to our community and to us that there is much work to be done and that we are being called to do that work. May this banner and all it signifies be challenge and comfort, hope and healing in the months and years to come. Amen.